London had dressed itself in glittering confidence beneath the pale breath of a winter moon, yet behind every polished carriage window travelled another passenger besides silk and privilege, gossip. Before the orchestra lifted its first elegant note inside Ashcombe Hall, whispers already floated through marble corridors, brushing powdered shoulders with delicious anticipation. They spoke of an engagement destined to unite two ancient families, of a gentleman whose fortune rivaled his honor, and of a lady whose quiet grace had conquered a heart too disciplined to be easily won. Every rumor pointed toward Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, whose gentle composure had become almost legendary among those who mistook silence for weakness. She entered the ballroom without theatrical flourish, clothed in ivory satin that caught the candlelight like fresh snow beneath dawn. Pearls rested at her throat, heirlooms entrusted to the eldest daughter of the house, while white camellias nestled among carefully arranged chestnut curls. Nothing about her demanded attention, yet attention followed her nevertheless, drawn by the rare dignity of someone who never sought admiration. She greeted acquaintances with measured courtesy, accepting bows and smiles that carried the warm certainty of expected congratulations. Near the towering windows stood her younger sister, Lady Vivian Ashcombe, radiant beneath scarlet velvet that shimmered like embers whenever she turned. Vivian possessed the sort of beauty that inspired painters and unsettled mothers. Every laugh rang bright enough to gather another circle of admirers, and every compliment appeared to nourish a restless hunger no amount of praise could satisfy. She embraced Eleanor with affectionate grace before stepping back, her smile lingering just a heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. "My dearest sister," Vivian murmured, her voice sweet as sugared wine, "how splendidly destiny favors this evening." Eleanor answered with affectionate warmth. "May destiny prove kinder than society, for society delights in disappointment." Vivian laughed softly, though something unreadable flickered behind her brilliant eyes before vanishing beneath practiced charm. Across the polished floor appeared Lord Adrian Blackwood. Tall, composed, and severe in black evening attire, he carried himself with the effortless restraint of a gentleman who measured every action before committing to it. Few men inspired greater admiration while speaking fewer words. His reputation rested not merely upon inherited wealth but upon unwavering integrity. Eleanor's pulse quietly betrayed the serenity visible upon her face. Their conversations over many seasons had unfolded through shared books, thoughtful glances, and restrained exchanges beneath blooming gardens. No declaration had been spoken publicly, yet hope had grown carefully between them, delicate as frost upon morning roses. The musicians paused. Conversation dissolved into expectant silence. Lady Margaret Ashcombe straightened proudly beside the staircase, believing years of careful sacrifice were about to receive their reward. Even servants lingered discreetly near carved doorways, sensing history poised upon its invisible threshold. Lord Adrian crossed the ballroom. Every heartbeat seemed to echo beneath the crystal chandeliers. Eleanor lowered her gaze for one trembling instant, steadying herself against happiness she scarcely dared display before so many watchful eyes. When she looked upward again, Adrian had passed her. He stopped before Vivian. A murmur rippled outward like a stone striking still water. Adrian bowed with solemn respect before producing a velvet ring box. Gasps fluttered through the gathering as he opened it, revealing a diamond whose brilliance scattered fractured stars across polished marble. "Lady Vivian Ashcombe," he said with careful restraint, "will you grant me the honor of becoming my wife?" Silence became heavier than music. Vivian lifted elegant fingers toward her lips, feigning astonishment so perfectly that no observer questioned its sincerity. Tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes as she extended her hand. "With all my heart," she replied. Applause erupted. Ladies smiled. Gentlemen nodded approvingly. Champagne glasses rose. Only Eleanor remained motionless, as though the world had forgotten to breathe around her. Her cheeks retained remarkable composure, yet warmth drained quietly from her hands. Every congratulatory embrace offered to Vivian became another invisible wound. She heard fragments drifting through the delighted crowd. "How fortunate the younger sister! I always suspected she possessed the greater charm. Poor Eleanor must have misunderstood his attentions." The words floated gently, almost kindly, which somehow rendered them crueler. Lady Margaret approached Eleanor without allowing alarm to disturb her regal bearing. "You must smile," she whispered. "Our family cannot afford spectacle." "I had no intention of providing one," Eleanor answered softly. Her mother searched her face for tears but discovered only disciplined calm. "That is my brave daughter." Bravery, Eleanor reflected, often resembled loneliness when viewed from nearby. Across the room Adrian briefly met her eyes. Joy should have illuminated the face of an engaged gentleman. Instead, uncertainty clouded his expression, and something painfully close to apology lingered there before Vivian slipped gracefully beside him, claiming every curious gaze. Eleanor looked away first. Whatever explanation might exist had already surrendered to appearances. Society judged what it witnessed, never what remained hidden beneath polished manners and rehearsed smiles. Unable to endure another blessing offered to the wrong couple, she excused herself with impeccable courtesy and escaped into the mansion's quiet library. Firelight painted amber reflections across rows of weathered books. The familiar scent of leather and old paper steadied her breathing until her trembling fingers reached absent-mindedly toward a beloved volume of poetry. As she opened it, a pressed white rose drifted into her palm. Years earlier, Adrian had placed that blossom between its pages after telling her that some flowers preserved beauty best through patience rather than display. She closed her hand around the fragile petals just as muffled voices reached the doorway beyond. "He never meant to ask for the younger sister," whispered one servant. And someone made certain the truth never reached the ballroom. Morning settled over London beneath a veil of silver rain, washing the streets clean while leaving reputations untouched by mercy. Before the bells announced the first hour, newspapers carried cheerful accounts of Lord Adrian Blackwood's engagement to Lady Vivian Ashcombe. The columns praised the match as one of elegance and fortune, celebrating beauty, lineage, and prosperity with the confident certainty of writers who never questioned appearances. Eleanor folded the paper without finishing the article. Every printed word felt less like news than a monument erected over hopes she had never spoken aloud. Ashcombe House, once warmed by easy conversation, grew strangely formal in the days that followed. Servants lowered their voices whenever Eleanor entered a room. Her mother busied herself with wedding preparations, convincing herself that relentless activity might smother uncomfortable questions before they reached respectable ears. Vivian drifted through the mansion surrounded by dressmakers, jewelers, and florists, receiving endless admiration with graceful delight. She embraced Eleanor often before others, displaying sisterly affection so flawlessly that even lingering pity gradually transformed into quiet suspicion. Invitations arrived daily for Vivian, each sealed with expensive wax and embroidered ribbons. Eleanor received none. Society had already decided which sister represented celebration and which embodied disappointment. She accepted the judgment with outward composure, retreating instead to the library where silence demanded neither explanation nor performance. Among shelves filled with forgotten histories and weathered poetry, she discovered companionship in voices long departed, authors who understood that dignity often survived only because grief learned restraint. Yet peace refused to remain undisturbed. One afternoon a liveried messenger delivered an elegant envelope addressed to Lord Adrian. The footman carried it directly to Blackwood Manor, thinking little of another congratulatory letter. By evening another arrived, then another before dawn. Within days a steady procession of anonymous correspondence reached the estate. None bore signatures. None revealed recognizable handwriting. Servants whispered that his lordship read each message alone before consigning it to the fire. Smoke curled daily above the chimneys despite the mild weather, carrying secrets skyward where no answer could be pursued. Meanwhile another story spread through London's drawing rooms with astonishing speed. According to carefully embroidered rumor, Eleanor had resented her younger sister's happiness so fiercely that she attempted to persuade Adrian to abandon the engagement. Some versions insisted she wept before him in private. Others claimed she offered desperate declarations beneath moonlit gardens. Every retelling grew more imaginative than the last. Those who scarcely knew her repeated these tales with compassionate smiles, believing themselves generous while dismantling the reputation she had spent years building through kindness and restraint. Lady Margaret confronted her daughter one quiet evening beside the drawing-room fire. "You must ignore such foolish talk," she insisted, arranging correspondence into perfect piles. "Rumors flourish only when fed." "I have offered them nothing," Eleanor answered. "Then continue offering nothing." Eleanor studied the flames. Silence does not always resemble innocence. Her mother hesitated before replying. Sometimes silence preserves a family when truth would destroy it. Those words lingered long after the conversation ended, echoing more painfully because they sounded almost like surrender. Days later, Eleanor attended Sunday service at the village church, hoping prayer might steady thoughts that refused peaceful order. Rain tapped gently upon stained glass while hymns rose toward vaulted ceilings scented with old stone and candle wax. As the congregation dispersed beneath waiting umbrellas, she noticed Lord Adrian standing alone near the ancient yew tree bordering the churchyard. He removed his hat respectfully, his expression solemn rather than hopeful. "Lady Eleanor," he began. She inclined her head politely. "I would ask only a single moment. I fear society has already granted us too many moments together." His jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm. "Appearances are imperfect witnesses. They are, unfortunately, the only witnesses London believes." She stepped toward her carriage before he could continue. The rain concealed whether moisture upon her cheek belonged to weather or restrained sorrow. Several evenings afterward the Ashcombes attended a charity gala supporting veterans and widows. Crystal chandeliers cast warm rivers of light across polished floors where musicians performed graceful waltzes. Vivian accepted compliments with radiant confidence while Eleanor remained near a gallery displaying donated paintings. She expected nothing beyond another evening endured politely until a familiar presence approached. Without requesting conversation, Adrian paused beside her. "You left this," he said quietly. He offered a single ivory glove. Eleanor stared at it, recognizing delicate embroidery stitched by her late grandmother. She had not realized it was missing. "My thanks," she replied carefully. Before she could extend her hand, Vivian approached surrounded by laughing companions. "There you are, Adrian," she said brightly. "Have you discovered my glove?" He looked toward Vivian only briefly. "No," he answered with measured clarity. "Lady Eleanor's." For a fleeting instant every nearby conversation seemed to falter. Nothing improper had occurred, yet the distinction lingered strangely within attentive minds. Vivian accepted the interruption with polished laughter, though disappointment flickered beneath her smile before disappearing behind practiced elegance. That single gesture, insignificant to strangers, settled deeply inside Eleanor's thoughts. Why had Adrian noticed what belonged to her while preparing to marry another? Why had apology continued haunting every glance he offered? Questions multiplied faster than answers. The following afternoon a modest parcel appeared upon the library table, delivered without accompanying note. Its wrapping bore no crest, only neat brown paper secured with ordinary twine. Eleanor untied the knot slowly, discovering a bundle of folded letters preserved within blue silk ribbon. Her heartbeat quickened before she touched the uppermost page. The handwriting belonged unmistakably to Adrian. At the top stood a date preceding the engagement announcement. Beneath it, written with unmistakable sincerity, appeared the opening words of a marriage proposal. The letter addressed not Lady Vivian Ashcombe, but Lady Eleanor Ashcombe. Her breath caught as another folded page slipped free, revealing signs that someone had carefully erased one name before replacing it with another. At last, suspicion yielded to something far more terrifying. Someone inside her own family had not merely stolen affection. Someone had rewritten destiny itself. The altered letter refused to leave Eleanor's thoughts, lingering before her eyes even after she carefully returned every page to its ribbon. Ink could be forged, signatures imitated, and paper stolen, yet the quiet honesty woven into Adrian's words belonged to no deceiver. Every sentence reflected conversations only they had shared beneath ancient oaks and within candlelit libraries. Whoever had altered the proposal possessed opportunity, patience, and an intimate knowledge of both families. The discovery transformed heartbreak into uncertainty, and uncertainty demanded answers that neither pride nor propriety could postpone forever. 3 evenings later, another note reached Eleanor through an elderly gardener who had served the Blackwood estate since Adrian's childhood. Unlike the anonymous package, this message bore no elaborate seal, only a single line written in Adrian's unmistakable hand. *Tomorrow, at sunset. The old greenhouse beyond the western gardens. I ask not for forgiveness, only for the chance to speak truth. She read the sentence repeatedly before folding it into her glove. Every lesson of respectable society warned against accepting such an invitation. Every instinct within her heart insisted that refusing would condemn both of them to a lifetime governed by lies. The following evening arrived beneath a sky burdened with low gray clouds. A gentle rain drifted across the countryside, soft enough to resemble mist yet steady enough to cloak footsteps from distant observers. Eleanor dismissed her carriage before reaching the western gardens, choosing instead to walk the final path alone. Fallen leaves whispered beneath her boots while bare branches stretched overhead like solemn witnesses. At the edge of the estate stood the abandoned greenhouse, its weathered glass cracked by years of neglect but still catching the fading light with fragile beauty. Inside, forgotten vines curled around rusted iron frames, and rain tapped quietly against broken panes. The scent of damp earth mingled with fading roses that somehow continued blooming despite abandonment. Adrian stood near the center beneath the fractured roof, his hands clasped behind his back, as though discipline alone prevented him from crossing the distance between them. For several heartbeats neither spoke. At last he removed his hat and bowed. "Lady Eleanor, thank you for granting me a kindness I scarcely deserve." She remained composed, though emotion tightened every breath. "You asked for truth, my lord. Truth should never require gratitude." His gaze lingered upon her with visible sorrow. "No. It requires courage." Silence settled again, filled only by the gentle rhythm of falling rain. Eleanor reached into her cloak and withdrew the altered proposal. "I received this." Adrian stared at the familiar pages, astonishment replacing restraint. "Where did you find it?" "It found me." He accepted the letter with careful hands, studying the erased name before closing his eyes. "So it is true," he whispered. "What is true?" "That someone succeeded." Her voice remained steady despite the storm gathering within. "You owe me an explanation." "I owe you far more than that." He inhaled slowly before speaking, each word measured with painful precision. "When I sought your mother's permission to ask for your hand, she welcomed the match without hesitation. I wrote my proposal that same evening, addressed exactly as my heart intended. It was entrusted to a servant who had served both our households faithfully for years." He paused, struggling against visible regret. "The reply I received accepted my proposal in your name. Arrangements advanced with remarkable speed. Every conversation with your family occurred through intermediaries. Whenever I requested a private meeting with you, I was informed you wished to preserve propriety until the announcement." Eleanor's heartbeat quickened. "I never received your letter." "I know that now." He looked toward the rain-streaked windows. "On the evening of the engagement, everything felt wrong. You appeared surprised. Your smile never reached your eyes. Yet before I could question anything, congratulations surrounded us. Society crowned a fusard before truth could draw breath." She stepped closer, unable to suppress the question haunting every sleepless night. "Why did you remain silent?" Pain crossed his face. "Because I believed I had already wounded you beyond forgiveness. I feared that protesting publicly would humiliate your family further while branding you the unwilling lady who rejected me." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "I never rejected you." "I know." Those two quiet words carried more tenderness than any grand declaration. Rain intensified above them, drumming softly upon fractured glass. She searched his expression, finding no trace of calculation, only exhaustion born from restrained devotion. "Who changed the letters?" "I cannot prove it," Adrian replied, "but too many coincidences point towards someone who benefited from the deception." Eleanor unfolded another page from the parcel. The original name was erased. He nodded slowly. Yes. My sister accepted what belonged to me. His silence confirmed what neither wished spoken aloud. Tears gathered despite every effort to command them. She smiled while watching me believe you had abandoned me. Adrian instinctively stepped forward before stopping himself, careful not to violate the invisible boundaries society had carved between unmarried ladies and gentlemen. If sorrow could be carried by another, he said quietly, I would bear yours without hesitation. She met his eyes. And if love survives betrayal? His answer came without delay. Then it was never built upon convenience. The simplicity of those words dissolved the final remnants of doubt. Eleanor no longer questioned his affection. She questioned only how deeply deceit had rooted itself around them. Neither reached for the other's hand. Neither forgot the world beyond broken glass. Yet the distance separating them no longer belonged to misunderstanding. It belonged to circumstance. Outside, hidden behind rain-soaked hedges bordering the greenhouse, another figure remained perfectly still. Vivian had followed the gardener after noticing his unusual errand the previous afternoon. Concealed beneath a dark cloak, she listened as every carefully guarded secret unraveled inside the abandoned sanctuary. Shock first widened her eyes, but fear quickly hardened into calculation. She slipped away before either could discover her presence, disappearing into gathering twilight with determined haste. By sunrise, London awoke to scandalous headlines accusing Lady Eleanor Ashcombe of conducting a secret romance with her own sister's fiancé, and every whispered lie carried the unmistakable precision of someone who already knew the truth. London greeted the morning with eager cruelty. Newspapers that had once praised Lady Eleanor Ashcombe's quiet grace now printed insinuations disguised as respectable concern. Anonymous columnists questioned the conduct of an unmarried lady who, according to unnamed witnesses, had pursued private meetings with her own sister's betrothed. Drawing rooms echoed with sympathetic sighs that concealed delighted curiosity. Invitations vanished from Eleanor's writing desk as though carried away by an invisible wind. Hostesses who had once admired her refinement suddenly remembered previous engagements whenever her name arose. Society possessed an extraordinary talent for transforming uncertainty into certainty whenever scandal promised entertainment. Within Ashcombe House the silence became heavier than accusation. Servants lowered their eyes when passing Eleanor in the corridors, uncertain whether compassion or caution better suited the changing tide. Lady Margaret wandered from room to room clutching unopened letters from acquaintances who now expressed regret that delicate circumstances prevented future visits. Each carefully composed sentence protected appearances while quietly closing another door. Reputation, Eleanor realized, could disappear without anyone ever raising a voice. Her mother summoned her to the morning room where pale sunlight struggled through lace curtains. You cannot remain here, Lady Margaret said, exhaustion softening the firmness that usually governed her speech. Your aunt in Devonshire has offered her estate until these unpleasant stories fade. You wish me to leave London. I wish to protect what remains. Eleanor regarded the trembling hands hidden within her mother's folded sleeves. By surrendering truth. By preserving our family. She stepped closer, her voice calm despite the ache pressing against every word. Mother, if innocence must hide while falsehood walks proudly through every ballroom, then what exactly are we preserving? Lady Margaret looked away before answering. Sometimes survival demands sacrifices that justice cannot understand. The conversation ended without resolution, leaving affection strained beneath the weight of opposing convictions. That afternoon Eleanor withdrew once more to the library, carrying the altered proposal, anonymous package, and every unanswered question. She spread each letter carefully across the polished desk, examining handwriting, dates, broken seals, and faint impressions left upon folded paper. Piece by piece the deception revealed its hidden order. Messages had disappeared only when delivered through particular servants. Replies had traveled unusual routes. Tiny inconsistencies, once invisible beneath excitement, now aligned with unsettling precision. Truth resembled a shattered mirror. Every fragment reflected only part of the whole until someone possessed patience enough to gather them together. As dusk approached, the elderly gardener from Blackwood Manor requested a private audience. Removing his weathered cap, he bowed respectfully before producing a worn leather journal. "I have carried this burden too long, my lady," he said quietly. Eleanor accepted the book with careful hands. Inside appeared dated entries recording household deliveries over many years. One page, written on the day Adrian's proposal had been dispatched, contained an unusual notation. The trusted servant assigned to deliver the letter had unexpectedly fallen ill that morning. Another messenger, newly employed and personally recommended by Lady Vivian's companion, completed the errand instead. The gardener lowered his voice. "I remembered because his lordship seemed unusually anxious that day. I thought nothing of the change until rumors began." "Why tell me now?" "Because decent people have remained silent while dishonest ones found courage." His words settled deeply within her heart. Before leaving, he added one final observation. "The servant who carried that letter resigned 3 days after the engagement announcement and has not been seen since." The final missing thread slipped into place. Eleanor realized that exposing the deception would require more than wounded testimony. Society would dismiss grief as jealousy unless undeniable evidence stood before it. She resolved that tears would no longer defend her. Facts would. During the following week she moved quietly through London, accompanied always by propriety and discretion. She met the retired solicitor who had witnessed Adrian requesting permission to propose. She obtained certified copies of correspondence preserved by Blackwood Manor. She persuaded former servants to provide written statements regarding altered deliveries. Each conversation demanded patience rather than outrage, humility rather than accusation. Slowly, a collection of undeniable truths replaced lonely suspicion. Meanwhile, Vivian flourished beneath public admiration. Dressmakers unveiled embroidered gowns for the approaching winter charity ball where she intended to announce the wedding date before the city's most influential families. She laughed easily, accepted compliments gracefully, and displayed flawless devotion toward Adrian whenever observers watched. Only when unobserved did flashes of impatience disturb her polished composure, for Adrian's increasing reserve denied her the triumph she had imagined. On the afternoon before the grand event, Eleanor requested a private meeting with Adrian inside Blackwood Manor's library. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust that drifted like tiny stars above countless leather-bound volumes. Without unnecessary ceremony, she placed every gathered document upon the table between them. He examined each page carefully. "You have accomplished what I feared impossible," he said. "No," Eleanor answered. "Truth accomplished it. I merely refused to abandon it." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "What will you do?" She lifted the original proposal letter. The same thing deceit never expected. His expression revealed concern. "Society delights in spectacle. Then let society witness something rarer than scandal." "What is that?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "Conscience." The following evening Ashcombe Hall glittered once again beneath crystal chandeliers as London's finest arrived wrapped in velvet, jewels, and confidence. Music floated through fragrant air scented with winter roses and polished cedar. Vivian descended the staircase wearing silver silk, believing the night belonged entirely to her. Hidden beneath Eleanor's simple ivory gloves rested the altered proposal, sworn statements, and every fragment of proof patiently gathered from the ruins of Betrayal. As the orchestra fell silent for the anticipated announcement, Eleanor stepped calmly into the center of the ballroom. Before a single word left her lips, Vivian smiled serenely, then raised one gloved hand and declared she possessed a final secret capable of destroying not merely Eleanor, but every member of the Ashcombe family forever. The ballroom fell into a silence so complete that even the final trembling note of the orchestra seemed unwilling to fade. Hundreds of crystal candles shimmered above the assembled guests, casting fractured light across polished marble as every eye settled upon the two Ashcombe sisters. Eleanor stood with quiet composure, her ivory gown untouched by ornament beyond a single strand of inherited pearls. Vivian, radiant in silver silk, held herself with practiced elegance, yet beneath her serene smile lingered the unmistakable tension of someone determined to strike before another voice could be heard. Lady Margaret gripped the carved banister overlooking the gathering, her face drained of color. Lord Adrian Blackwood remained motionless near the ballroom's center, every instinct urging him toward Eleanor while every rule of decorum demanded restraint. Around them, society leaned forward with breathless anticipation, sensing that the evening promised something far greater than another fashionable announcement. Vivian's smile widened. "You believe you possess the truth," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Yet truth has many faces. Shall I reveal the one our family has hidden for years?" A ripple of uncertainty passed through the crowd. Lady Margaret closed her eyes. "Vivian," she whispered, "do not." But the younger sister had crossed too many boundaries to retreat. "Our father," Vivian declared, "did not leave this family as honorably as everyone believes. His fortune was preserved only because Mother concealed debts that would have ruined us. Every invitation we accepted, every title we protected, every smile we offered society rested upon carefully maintained illusion." Gasps swept through the ballroom. Lady Margaret lowered her head, unable to deny the accusation. For a brief moment Eleanor understood exactly what Vivian intended. If the family's reputation collapsed entirely, no one would care which sister had stolen a proposal. Truth itself would drown beneath a greater scandal. Vivian turned toward Eleanor. "So tell them your story, dear sister. They will never hear it above this." Eleanor regarded her quietly. There was no anger upon her face. Only profound sadness. She stepped forward, placing the bundle of letters upon a nearby table where every guest could see them. "My sister has spoken honestly about our mother's burdens," Eleanor said calmly. "Our father made grave mistakes, and our mother sacrificed her own peace to protect her daughters from consequences we did not create. That truth deserves compassion, not shame." Her unexpected response unsettled the room. She had refused the trap. Instead of denying the family secret, she had embraced it. Eleanor lifted Adrian's original proposal. "This, however, concerns choices freely made." She unfolded the letter with steady hands. "Months ago Lord Adrian Blackwood wrote asking for my hand in marriage." The room remained silent. "He addressed this letter to me." She held the page high enough for those nearest to recognize the carefully preserved writing. "It never reached me." Next came the altered copy. The name upon this version was changed. She presented statements from the gardener, the solicitor, and former servants, each confirming the unusual chain of events surrounding the proposal. Adrian stepped beside her only after she had spoken every necessary word herself. "I swear before every witness present," he said firmly, "that Lady Eleanor Ashcombe is the woman I asked to marry. She has spoken nothing tonight except the truth." One by one, the documents passed through respected members of the gathering. Faces changed. Expressions hardened. Whispers shifted direction. The certainty that had condemned Eleanor began dissolving beneath undeniable evidence. Vivian watched the transformation with widening disbelief. "No," she breathed. "They cannot believe this." An elderly duchess lowered the final affidavit. "It is rather difficult not to." The ballroom no longer admired Vivian. It examined her. The difference proved devastating. Her carefully maintained confidence began to fracture. She laughed once, though the sound carried no joy. "It was only a letter," she insisted. No one answered. "It was only an opportunity." Still no reply. Finally her composure shattered. "I spent my entire life watching Eleanor receive everything without asking." Tears filled her eyes, though pride still battled remorse. Everyone praised her kindness, her patience, her dignity. They admired her simply for existing while I struggled to be noticed. When I discovered Adrian meant to marry her, I could not bear becoming the forgotten sister once again. So I changed the letter. I intercepted the replies. I persuaded a servant with promises of money. I spread the rumors before anyone could question the engagement. Every confession echoed through the ballroom like the tolling of distant bells. I wanted one thing to belong to me. She looked directly at Eleanor. Just once. Silence answered her. Not triumphant silence. Mourning silence. Lady Margaret wept openly. Adrian remained beside Eleanor, though he allowed her alone to decide what justice should become. Many expected outrage. Others anticipated humiliation equal to the suffering Vivian had inflicted. Instead, Eleanor slowly crossed the distance separating them. Vivian looked up, bracing herself. Eleanor stopped only a step away. "I cannot pretend you have not wounded me," she said gently. "You stole trust before you stole love. Those are injuries time remembers." Vivian lowered her eyes. "I know. But hatred would only continue the theft." The younger sister frowned in confusion. "You already lost because you believed another person's happiness diminished your own." Eleanor reached out and took Vivian's trembling hands. "I will not lose myself by becoming cruel in return." A single tear escaped Vivian's composure. Then another. At last she collapsed into quiet sobs unlike the carefully rehearsed displays society had always admired. No applause followed. No satisfaction greeted her downfall. Only the unbearable weight of genuine remorse. Within days Vivian withdrew from London, declining every invitation and leaving for a distant coastal village where no titles accompanied her name. She carried neither jewels nor triumph, only the memory of a sister whose mercy proved heavier than punishment. Winter gradually surrendered to spring. The gardens surrounding Blackwood Manor awakened beneath fresh blossoms and singing birds. One peaceful morning Adrian invited Eleanor to walk beside the lake where young willow branches touched the water like graceful fingers. There were no guests waiting behind hedges, no orchestra rehearsing nearby, no eager spectators hoping for fashionable entertainment. Only sunlight. Only quiet. Only truth. Adrian turned toward her with a small velvet box resting in his hands. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice warm with unshaken devotion, "the first time I asked for your future, deceit answered in your place. Allow me to ask again, with no barriers except your own heart." He knelt. "I have loved your kindness more than beauty, your courage more than comfort, and your integrity more than every fortune I possess. Will you become my wife?" Tears shimmered within Eleanor's eyes, yet this time they carried no grief. She smiled. "Yes, my lord." He slipped the ring upon her finger beneath open skies where nothing remained hidden. Their wedding took place several weeks later in a quiet country chapel surrounded by blooming roses and close friends who valued character above reputation. Lady Margaret watched with grateful tears, understanding at last that truth had preserved the family more faithfully than silence ever could. As for London, its whispers eventually changed into admiration, though Eleanor no longer sought society's approval. She had discovered something infinitely more enduring. The greatest revenge was never the ruin of the one who betrayed her. It was living with a heart that betrayal could not corrupt, proving that love strengthened by truth will always outlast deception, and that dignity, once tested by suffering, becomes a light no darkness can extinguish.